Good evening, everyone. Welcome, members, welcome, officers, to this month's Scrutiny Panel meeting. Run through the safety procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the main staircases, opposite the lifts in the foyer. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed to return back to the chamber. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make and receive phone calls while this meeting is in progress. This meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? And there's no members of the public, so we'll move on. Are there any members who wish to speak under 20.1? That's a no. Moving on to the main agenda items. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
Yeah, apologies from Councillor Pope and Councillor Britcher.
Thanks, Councillor Curry. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? And that's a no. Moving on to item number 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. To approve the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting held on the 18th of June, a copy is attached to the agenda pack. Can I have a proposer? Councillor Austin and a seconder, Councillor Green. Do all members agree? Excellent. Okay, moving on. Item number 4, the HRA Tower Blocks Refurbishment and Retrofit Programme. I call on Sally O'Sullivan to introduce the report. Evening.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, the Tower Block Retrofit and Refurbishment Programme, didn't start well, did it? Programme will see transformational works to 5 of the tower blocks owned by Thanet District Council. Some of the works we are carrying out are essential for health and safety, for example, the replacement of the external wall insulation. The increased scope of this project is also due to the discovery of essential fire safety works, which have contributed to the additional costs. Most of the increased costs are due to the external wall system remediation, as we have chosen a more expensive system for its improved fire rating and reduced ongoing maintenance requirements and greater durability. The cost of this will be fully funded by Homes England grant. These works are non-negotiable, and we would not get approval from the Building Safety Regulator for the project without addressing these issues. Once the health and safety works are completed, we'll be able to step down the waking watch that has been posted at each tower to mitigate the fire risk. This will mean the HRA revenue account can move from deficit to surplus. Other works will ensure the buildings are fit for purpose into the future, for example, the replacement of windows and the roof. We recognise that the costs may be a challenge for some leaseholders, but they will benefit from the improvements to their homes, which will include the energy efficiency measures that contribute to a lower energy consumption. During this project, we've carried out a lot of consultation with residents. For example, the consultation to choose the colour and design of the outside of the towers. At key stages in this project, we have held face-to-face events in the blocks so residents have an opportunity to speak to our architects, contractors and consultants. We have 2 resident liaison officers who hold a large estate presence and are on hand to answer any questions. And we also have a high-rise living resident group that meet once per quarter. They discuss issues regarding building safety, but this forum is also there to discuss concerns about this project. Finally, much of this project is externally funded. The Building Safety Fund is provided to resolve safety issues with cladding in buildings over 18 metres and will fund 100% of the cost of these works. We have been awarded £4.2 million from the Social Housing Decarbonation Fund, which is in place to reduce the energy efficiency measures in the blocks. It is due to the award of funding that makes this programme of work affordable to the Council, which provides efficiencies once it's carried out, and we shouldn't have to carry out any other scaffold-dependent works like window replacement or balcony refurbishments for the next 30 to 40 years. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Sally. Members? Councillor Green?
Yeah. What are residents telling you about the plans, and in particular leaseholders?
The residents are supportive of the plans. Leaseholders are as well, although they are concerned about the costs which they will need to pay through service charge. They are supportive of the plans because of the fire safety, and also they were involved in the consultation to do with the design and the colour schemes for the buildings, and I think everyone would agree that they will look so much nicer once they are completed. There's also energy efficiency within this project as well, so in the end our residents should benefit from reduced energy consumption.
What are the costs to leaseholders?
The cost is between £25,000 and £40,000. It's quite a large spanning amount, and this is because the cost does depend on the size of the blocks, how many properties are in the blocks, and also the size of the individual properties that are owned by leaseholders.
Presumably that would be spread over a number of years, will it?
Yes, so we do invoice in one go, but we will be in a position to be able to speak to leaseholders on an individual basis if this is not affordable for them, to work out an affordable repayment plan over a number of years. Is that okay?
Councillor Curry.
Yeah, do we know how many leaseholders would be affected by this?
Yes, give me one moment.
We're just getting the exact numbers for you. Save us coming back to you. Might take a little while to find, so should we go on to the... Should we come back in a minute on that? Sally's going to look it up, but if there's other questions, we'll take those first. Oh no, she's found it. She's found it. That was like, can you just feel for a little bit, Bob, while I find them?
.32 leaseholders in total.
Anybody else? Councillor Wing.
Oh, thank you. That's put me right off my stroke. Will the leaseholders have the option of a charge against their property instead of repayments? And will that be subject to an increase over the period of time that charge is there? So if they stay there for 20 years, does it become more than 25k or 40 or whatever their amount is?
Hello, thank you. For this programme, there will not be the option of a charge against the property. Okay, but we will work with our leaseholders to make sure that the repayment plan is affordable for them.
The thing I'd like to say is about the Waking Watch. I know people that live in all the towers. Obviously, I know more that live in Harbour Towers, and they have all massively appreciated the Waking Watch. And I know that's a massive cost saving to not have that. But I'm kind of thinking in some of the tower blocks to remove it completely actually ends up with costs elsewhere through vandalism. Is there any way that maybe you could work out the cost per household, and we talk to the residents? I know in two of the tower blocks there's a large number of TDC social housing there, but it seems to me that the overall feeling of everybody I've spoken to who lives in the tower blocks, they have really, really appreciated the Waking Watch.
I think there's probably a couple of things to say. I think we know that everybody likes it and it's been really successful, and it's helped to improve the management of waste in the buildings, and it's helped to reduce antisocial behaviour and vandalism, and so lots of good reasons for thinking about it. I think the starting point is that we are running a deficit in the housing revenue account, in the revenue part of the revenue of the account anyway. And we do need to get that back into surplus. We need to get that back into surplus as soon as we can. Obviously, long term, all of the council's demands in terms of maintenance and investment in the existing homes and our new build programme rely on the strength of the HRA business plan. And so really to support that in the long term, we need to have a plan that runs in surplus. When the Waking Watch has made a massive impact on the revenue position, and we outturned with a small surplus last year, but we'd budgeted for a deficit. We're budgeting for a deficit this year. If you took that cost away, we would be in a surplus position. Now that doesn't mean to say that we can't do something additional when we've finished this programme and we step the Waking Watch down. We could either bring forward proposals for affordable growth within the revenue account at the appropriate time, or we could consult with residents about introducing an additional service charge to pay for another service. What's probably worth remembering is that we did already do that once, and 2 of our housing response officers are paid for by a service charge on tower block residents that was introduced following a consultation. So we could do that again, but of course there's going to be a point where residents say we can't afford any more. So I think that's quite a long way of saying we can have a look at it, but you know the priority needs to be to get the revenue account back into balance.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. When you have buildings the size we're talking about and we hear about fire safety and cladding, obviously it takes minds to other events elsewhere. Is this work the result of historic bad work or just improvements that need to be made in general?
Yeah. I'll respond to that because Sally wasn't here when we first started to have to deal with this, but I was. We did quite a lot of work at the time, straight after the events at Grenfell Tower, and I think a lot of social landlords around the country were looking at what systems they had and whether they'd been installed properly and all that sort of thing. And we did a lot of work. We looked at all of the contracts that were let at the time, and that work was done in the early 2000s. We also took samples of the insulation system that's installed, had them tested, and effectively what came back from that was that the system had been installed as designed. So there was nothing wrong with the workmanship. It had been installed as designed. But of course, what's happened in the intervening period is that building regulations have significantly changed. And whereas in the early 2000s it was appropriate to use those materials on the outside of tall buildings, it now isn't. I think people are much more aware of the risks associated with that. But to answer your question, which is about the standard of the installation and the workmanship, no, there was nothing wrong with the installation itself.
And just because, again, I don't fully understand the council's insurance regime, are these tower blocks insured? So if there was any damage to the underlying asset, they would be insured. And I'm just interested in how the insurer would view some of the work that obviously hasn't been completed because there hasn't been funding for that. Have you had any property surveys, and has that given sort of any recommendations? And I'm wondering if they all feed into this, that if we do this work, we go from potentially having assets that were not fully insured, or we had to take a large chunk of the risk on it, to an asset that now, when this work's done, it could be properly insured, and therefore some of the money that council may have had to put aside in case there was an issue can now be released. What's the insurance coverage like on these blocks?
I think if we want to answer that in full, I think we probably need some professional advice from one of our insurance officers. I mean, obviously the first part, you started the question by saying, are they insured? Well, yes, of course, they are insured. There's insurance across the whole of the housing stock, the council's assets. They're also valued annually. There's a revaluation procedure in place, and that valuation informs the accounting treatment of the assets in the plan. But if you wanted any more detail of that, so we'd have to ask those questions of the insurance officer. The other important factor here is about risk mitigation, and the Waking Watch is very specifically about risk mitigation. So, and with those arrangements in place, that helps to reduce the risk across the buildings.
Councillor Curran?
I was wondering, does the council offer a buyback scheme to leaseholders who have directly bought the properties from the council in fairly recent times?
We can buy units back, and we have done in the past. It completely depends on whether we have a funded programme at the time that somebody wants to sell a unit. So if we've got an approved acquisitions programme and somebody wants to sell us a unit, then we certainly can. But as a matter of course, we can't guarantee that we'll buy units back from leaseholders if they want to sell.
Members, any further questions?
I'm being told that we have bought back one unit in the 5 blocks that we're talking about here. So, yeah, so it's definitely possible.
Councillor Wing.
I guess the only thing going forward is to ensure. I know in my tower block, the one in our tower block, the one in Harbour Towers, there is a significant number of elderly people with mobility issues, and I guess there's the same in the others. And it's making sure that the residents are fully informed during the refurbishment process. When the lifts went in, it did create a bit of uncomfortableness for some residents because the lifts were only going to certain floors, which was understandable. But I think those residents felt that maybe communication hadn't been as good as it should have been, but maybe they weren't listening. So again, it's trying to soften the blow in a sense, because it's going to be, I don't know how long the build's going to take, but it's not a week's worth of work, is it?
Yeah, we totally understand the impact on residents, and because of that is why we have the 2 resident liaison officers in place, and we have had done for the last 6 to 9 months. We also issue a monthly newsletter to keep residents updated with what is going on month by month, where we were up to in the programme, what's going to happen next. The resident liaison officers are on site a lot of the time, and they make their presence known so that anybody can approach them and ask questions. We've got a dedicated email address, which you've used, which comes straight to us to answer any questions on it as well. We issue FAQs to people. So we've got quite a robust communications plan to make sure that everyone knows what's happening.
Councillor Green.
Just on that, have individual leaseholders been told individually how much it's going to cost them?
They have been provided with an estimate, and the estimate would have been provided to them back last year, because we had to apply for dispensation on the statutory Section 20 consultation, which the tribunal awarded us due to seeing value for money in the approach that we were taking with the blended funding. So they were provided an estimate. Then we will follow through, even though we can't complete the Section 20 process in the absolute correct way that it's legislated. We will complete the process and issue a notice of estimates in the same way, and allow leaseholders to have observations on that as well, so that they will then see how much, they'll have an updated view of how much we estimate the costs will be to them.
Okay. I will ask if there are any recommendations you want to make. No, we're all happy. Okay, we'll send that one off to Cabinet then. Okay, moving on to item number 5, the HRA World Crescent Capital Project. I'll call upon Sally again for that one.
Thank you. Royal Crescent is a Grade 2 listed building of historical significance. It sits on the seafront of Ramsgate's West Cliff. The council owns 2 buildings in the Crescent. It is in need of essential structural and fire safety works which will ensure the buildings are fit for purpose into the future. The complex nature of the building has impacted the timeframe and cost of the project, as is laid out in the report. We again recognise that the cost is a challenge for leaseholders, but have put in place the ability to add the costs of the works as a charge against the property, and we are referring ourselves to First Tier Land Tribunal, who will make a judgment on if the costs are reasonable. Once the works are complete, these leaseholders will also benefit from the improvements to their homes. And if there are any questions on that report, thank you.
Members? Councillor Wing?
I'm glad there's a tribunal, because that everything's out in the open. Are the residents that would have charges against their property able to represent themselves at that tribunal?
I don't see why not. I think that there is already a resident association group there that will probably be representing the body at the tribunal.
Anybody else? Okay, so we're asked to look at those recommendations and note the report. Have we all look at those and note the report? Okay, thanks, members. Moving on to item number 6, the Local Authority Housing Fund, LAHF, round 3. I'll call on Ms Jackson. Ashley, over to you.
Thank you. In December 2022, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities launched the Local Authority Housing Fund. This was a £500 million capital fund for local authorities in England to obtain accommodation for families with housing needs who have arrived in the UK fleeing the war in Ukraine, and families on Afghan resettlement and relocation schemes. The reason for this was to help ensure that those communities who had been generous in welcoming new arrivals were not penalised with longer social housing waiting lists. Last year, Thanet District Council was awarded £694,000 as part of the second round of the LAF, approved by Cabinet on the 16th of November 2023, and now it has been awarded £619,500 as part of the government's £450 million 2-year expansion to the scheme, which aims to provide local authorities with a longer-term pipeline of support and to unlock more new supply and developments. Given Thanet District Council's proactive acquisitions programme, it has been possible to secure the 4 properties that are required of it through the criteria for round 3. These homes have been secured through Vistry at Westwood Point. Thanet is purchasing 4 properties, 3 3-bedroom properties, 1 for temporary accommodation and 2 medium-sized resettlement properties, and 1 4-bedroom property, again for the resettlement element. These properties are being acquired from Vistry at Westwood Point. This is the location of the 14 properties already acquired by the council for the LAF round 1 and 2. The council has a strong working relationship with Vistry and is confident that these properties will be high quality and serve the initial purpose required by the funding criteria, and then ultimately be good assets to transfer into the HRA stock. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Members, Councillor Austin.
Thanks, Ashley. Can I ask how the LAF works? Do you have to actually bid for it, or it's allocated to us on the basis of the numbers of people that we've got in need? Yep.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure of how they it is allocated to us, but I'm not quite sure how they work it out. But all the LAF rounds that they've given us a certain amount and told us how many we needed to buy.
Anybody else? No. Can I just ask, so when the Afghans move in there, do they have any support from us? Obviously, they're coming from temporary accommodation or B&Bs or whatever, and they're moving into a house on an estate.
We have an officer who works in the team, Ukrainian officer. The Afghan households, they come from KCC, so they have resettlement workers who work with them, and we support them.
No more questions? Okay, we'll ask to note the report and we'll send that off to Cabinet. Thanks, Ashley. Moving on to item number 7, the approval of temporary accommodation policy. I'll call on Ashley again to introduce the report.
Great, thank you. So heightened temporary accommodation usage is placing financial strain on all local authorities' general funds, and it's essential that the council has a strong and transparent policy in place that clearly shows how it approaches the placement of homeless households both inside and outside the Thanet boundary. The council works with households to prevent homelessness occurring wherever possible. However, regrettably, it is not possible to prevent homelessness in all cases, and some households will therefore be required to use temporary accommodation. The proposed policy document sets out Thanet District Council's approach to the placement of homeless households in temporary accommodation inside and, where unavoidable, outside of the Thanet District. The temporary accommodation policy sets out the principles the council will apply to recover some of the cost of providing TA through reasonable charging, i.e. for the use and the occupation of the accommodation provided. In many cases, those households will be entitled to either full or partial housing benefit payment as provided within the legislation. The policy takes into account the statutory requirements on local authorities to find suitable accommodation, and relevant case law. It's also important to consider the needs of safeguarding and promote the welfare of the children. Thank you.
Okay, members. Councillor Wing.
I seem to, it might just be I'm not walking in the right places anymore, but I seem to get a sense that we've got less homeless people on the street. Have we still got a rising trend, and it may be because you guys are doing such a fabulous job that they're not on the streets long enough, but do we have a rising trend? Has it tailed off, or I'm certainly seeing, I mean, I think there's been a spike recently in my ward of evictions, but there'd been a period of where I hadn't come across any, not that there wasn't any, but they just hadn't come to my attention. That reached out for help. So what's the picture looking like for evictions and also homeless people?
I think street homeless is pretty stable. They're probably just not visible. They're still there. Our street count was quite high last time it's verified. It's a massive issue, homelessness. You know, people can't afford to pay their rent. They're being evicted. It's just rising consistently. So yeah, sorry.
Councillor Curran.
Yeah, I fully support this this policy. I'm sure all members have had to deal with Section 21s and the grief that people have to suffer, that do suffer once they've received these notifications. What I was thinking was, does the empty homes policy sort of tie in with the temporary accommodation? And while talking about empty homes, I was wondering if loans are still available for people to bring these empty homes back into use. And also, I think the 200 homes that have already been secured, I'm sure that will make a big difference as well, because I know that does tie in with the policy we're looking at. Thanks.
Yeah, so with regards to the empty homes, obviously we've got an empty homes officer. The problem with empty homes is they're generally owned by someone who normally doesn't know they own it, or we can't get hold of them. It's, you know, we've got a specific officer dealing with that. We can't just use them for temporary accommodation. The homes that we have purchased under the acquisition programme, 50% of those go directly to households in temporary accommodation. So yeah, that is definitely helping to reduce the numbers. What was your other question?
A resident asked me about loans for...
Yes. Yeah, we've still got a loan. So we've still got a specific loan available in Cliftonville West and Margate Central for long-term empty properties. And I believe KCC have a loan scheme as well, but ours is specifically in Margate Central and Cliftonville West at the moment.
Thanks very much.
Anybody else? Councillor Austin?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ashley. I'm thinking about, I really like the way that we've set this out in a clear way so that everybody can see. How do we explain that to residents when they are they find themselves in this situation, how do we get the message across about how we prioritise and all of that? Because obviously we've got all of this written in officialese. How do we actually explain it face to face to a resident in that situation?
It is just by when we meet them with when they have their personal housing plan, or we're interviewing for homelessness. We've got a new housing options manager who's kind of brought this person-centred approach in, which has been, you know, in the few months she's been there, it's been amazing. It's all about communication. So this will be explained to them when we have to place them in temporary accommodation. If we have to place them out of the area, you know, we can explain the criteria for bringing them back. So it is just about us communicating it.
I'd just like to say then it's certain of the experience that I've had with particularly vulnerable residents who've been forced into temporary accommodation. Staff have been absolutely fabulous. They've really, really gone above and beyond, and it's massively appreciated.
Anybody else? You're very quiet tonight. I think that might change shortly. Okay, if no further questions, we'll ask to note the report and we'll send that one off to Cabinet. Thanks, Ashley. Moving on to item number 8, the Thanet Pathfinder Project's procurement approvals. I'll call on Louise to present the report.
Thank you. So this report is to invite members of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel to scrutinise, note and comment upon the proposed report for Cabinet. The report to Cabinet is requesting approval to enter new contracts for works and services for the delivery of 6 projects which form part of the Pathfinder scheme in Margate and Ramsgate. The works contracts are for the Margate Town Deal Coastal Wellbeing, for the Walpole Bay Pavilion, the lift structure and the skate park, the Ramsgate Levelling Up Fund project for Newington Community Centre, which includes refurbishment and extension. This includes the HRA funding that's had already been approved, the Future High Street Fund and Levelling Up Fund scheme for Broad Street, which is delivering a creative and community hub, and we've already purchased the building. And then finally, contract for services for the Margate Town Deal Theatre Royal and 19 Hawley Square restoration, conservation and modernisation. That includes design teams for the next stage. Clearly this is an exciting time for the Regeneration and Growth team to be able to be moving these schemes forward to the next stage of delivery. The report outlines the approved budgets and the procurement route for each of the schemes identified, and has been taken to Cabinet on the basis that it is a key decision, with values being over 250,000. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Members, David.
Yes, congratulations, Louise, for getting these projects this far. It's an enormous amount of work. As you know, I have asked for the business case for some of these projects, and you have said that you will get them to me, but they're not available at the moment. So it's really difficult to scrutinise these without that.
Thank you. So not all of the projects have a business case as you would expect them to be set out because of the way in which they were funded through central government. What we have is the town investment plan for the town deal process, and then for the levelling up fund bid, we've got the bid proposal. Then for each stage through the REBA stages, we've got all of the engagement documents that we've had in those open sessions. So all of those help to build the business case for delivery of the schemes. In terms of some of the Ramsgate schemes, we've got a model of management exercise that we're just working through at the moment, so that will help us understand whether we want to be the managers of that building, so Green Campus, for example, or whether we're going to put out the scheme for a third party to come forward and manage the operation on our behalf. So that exercise is happening alongside the REBA stages, and some of that will be informed when we have final designs and final costs. But at each stage, we've been hosting those exhibition and events to gain feedback, and that's informed that process.
Anybody else? Councillor Curry.
Yeah, first, well done to the team. Great to see the project moving on. And I wondered, will there be another public engagement meeting in the near future when things start to really push forward?
Is that for any particular scheme or all of them?
Probably Cliftonville West projects, sorry.
That's fine. I mean, the intention is, where it makes sense through the REBA stages of delivery, is to host events and or open up your voice, Thanet, and ask for specific questions. What we don't want to do is hold events when we haven't necessarily got an opportunity for people to feed back into. For the skate park, for example, one of what we will be doing is a design and build on the basis of what has already been designed, and we will be working with those designs to take it through a two-stage process. And there will be there will be some open engagement process as part of that, because we'll have a break for the planning permissions, etc. So where it makes sense to do it, we will be holding events for people to feed in. I mean, the one for the Walpole Bay Pavilion was incredibly well attended, and we've used a lot of the information that came in that to feed into the next stages of design. So we all value those. It's about hosting them when they make sense.
Councillor?
I think I'm speaking for Ramsgate, but I think it resonates with the other towns' funding as well. Sometimes the residents feel like little children waiting for Christmas to come, and it seems to never come. We keep going, there's 2 more sleeps, and it just keeps extending and extending. And all this money's been hanging around for, it seems, several years now, but nobody's ever seen anything happen. But I know in Ramsgate there's been real positive engagement in the recent sessions that have been held. So there's still that massive enthusiasm in the town, and I think it's really important that we try and keep that going. So if we could find a way of communicating, you know, when possibly some refurbishment might happen on the Broad Street, and when the Green Campus, the first brick might be laid, I think it'd be really good to keep that level of enthusiasm going. I know I get overexcited about things, but yeah, it's good to see bricks laid and things moving forward.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, one of the intentions will be any of the buildings that need hoardings will have information up on those hoardings so that people can see timeline for delivery. It is one of the things that we've fed back to central government around the way in which these schemes have been managed and processed, because there has been big gaps, and as frustrating as it is for residents, it's equally so for officers. Things have taken a lot longer than we had hoped and anticipated, and we were part of a discussion with the other Pathfinder areas. There's 10 of us in total earlier today, and the challenges we face are not unique to us, and these are local authorities across the country. There's only 2 of us in the south that are part of the Pathfinder. There's more further up the country, and quite a lot of the issues that we've faced that have challenged these programmes are the same across the board.
Anybody else? Oh, yes, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to add to the points Louise made, I think completely recognise and understand the frustration around the timeframes that followed. My own sort of professional view on that is a critique I have of the nature of the way grant funding is allocated on a bidding basis is that local authorities often have to put bids in at very short notice with short time frames, and therefore those are then awarded based on those, which sometimes are speculative bids that we're putting in, and then officers have to work at pace to deliver these schemes and to develop full business cases, appoint various different design and cost consultant teams before we can get into the delivery phase. Added to that, as you talked about the pandemic, but also we've been in a very high inflation environment for the last few years, which has added incredible pressure onto Louisa's and her team to basically then work back from what those initial proposals were, because not just, we've all looked at consumer price index, construction costs have been way above that. So that's posed a real challenge to the team. I think that's reflective of why things have taken a bit longer than we would want them to.
Councillor Austin.
I just add to that I think one of the difficulties that we have is that every time there is an announcement that we've got money, residents think, oh great, we've got money, as in it's a free-for-all, you know, can we have an X? Yeah. They don't know the time that has gone into trying to meet the criteria of a particular government fund and squeeze out the relevant number of jobs or whatever it is, and this is the one thing that will fit it. And residents, and some of that, I have to say, is perhaps press reporting, where we get a lot of stuff about, you know, we've got all this money. Well, we haven't actually got all this money. We've got a project which we can fund. And I don't know how we get that message out any more clearly, but we're constantly saying to residents as elected members, yes, I know you'd love there to be an X, but actually we've got money for a Y. And isn't it great that we've got money for a Y, and look at all the things we can do with it.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding inflation and so on, so I don't know whether the question's for Chris probably, but do we have, excuse me, a cumulative figure over the last couple of years of the impact of inflation on these funds, so that we've sort of got an amortised figure that tells us what the effective loss of value is?
Louise, do you want me to defer it? Yeah, over to Louise.
Thanks. Yes, so we, I think midpoint last year, back end of last year, checked across the Ramsgate programme for a number of the schemes, and it was somewhere between 20 and 30%, and I think we might have published that in some of the reports. So that is the impact up to expected midpoint of construction of inflation on the schemes. So the challenge was, at the time of bidding, we were in what was a relatively normal inflation position, so you could only put in that, and you couldn't cover it with levels of contingency that were deemed to be too high as set by government.
Councillor Green.
Could I phrase my question a different way? These are capital bids in the main, aren't they? Is consideration being given to the ongoing costs to the council going forward from these capital bids?
Yes, is the short answer. The slightly longer answer is each project is being looked at independently on the basis of what it is for. So for things like the Clock House, we are looking at a cafe facility to support income into the Clock House, to support the sustainability. Theatre Royal, for example, the council put in 19 Hawley Square to create a performance hub to in order for it to make an income that will help bridge the subsidy gap. Sorry, I said sustainability, I meant subsidy. Each of the schemes that we are looking at whether there is something commercial or a different way of operating it, to make sure that there isn't an ongoing cost to the council. And then we're working with, as we get more of that information in around the models of management, we're working with the finance team to put together a kind of what's the bottom line for the council. So where it's on our assets, there'll be reduced liabilities, reduced costs because of refurbishment works, also potentially where there might be an income, or maybe where there's a loss of income if we've moved some parking, for example. So we're looking at all of those to make sure, because it's not in any of our interests for these regeneration schemes to undermine the council's budget process. So the whole team is working on that across the spectrum of projects.
Chris.
Thanks. Just to add to Louise's point, she may have already made it, but just to sort of perhaps echo some of the things she already said. In addition to the commercial side, some of this investment is in assets we already own. By making that investment now with government-funded monies, that actually helps us in the longer term. Theatre Royal is a listed building. If investment isn't made in it, that just creates a liability for us in the longer term. So actually, by having this investment, actually it kind of de-risks us and actually helps us reduce those future revenue liabilities, because without that investment further down the line, there's going to be a big bill that we're going to be needed to make those buildings right. Over and above that, because it's all government funded, there aren't obviously borrowing or revenue cost implications involved with repaying debt or interest costs that are associated with it as well. So,
I just want to say that we're focused on finance, but I actually went down with a resident to tend to the palms outside the clock house, and of course the guys that are in there doing the work in the clock house had to let us through the Harris fencing, and we got given a tour of what they're doing. And there's something called social profit, and there's a massive social profit about the whole 70 volunteers I think in total helping to log all the stuff that we've got in there. Absolutely amazing pieces. And then of course all the stuff that's happening out of the Discovery Planet that's happening there. So we mustn't lose sight of, we have to make sure that whatever we're developing doesn't create a financial liability for us, but we have to find some way of recording that social profit. And I know some of those people that are working down in the clock house and also in Discovery are people that have really benefited in terms of their health and well-being through being there, and I don't know how we document that, but it's really important to make sure we do that.
Thank you. So the team have got a spreadsheet. One of the things that we noticed quite quickly in doing some of this work is where the team were being able to bring people together, even if they were slightly outside of the project sphere, and things were happening, particularly in Cliftonville around the coastal wellbeing activities. But what we've asked them to do is to document all of those things. Now, for the returns to central government, there's specific outputs, as Councillor Austin said, we had to sign up to say we'll deliver this many jobs. There's also a massive long list of outcomes, and although we didn't necessarily target ourselves, because in none of the schemes did we have to, we will be using that to report on things that are listed as their outcomes to say, actually, this has been delivered as well. So we're measuring footfall, which will be useful for lots of people and lots of organisations, but we will be documenting those things. And I think the UK Shared Prosperity Programme, which sits outside of this, but has a focus around building capacity and capability within the community and voluntary social enterprise sector, is what, the officer is working alongside the capital delivery officers to make sure that we can help those organisations that are bringing on volunteers to see where there might be a link across in terms of the capital programme. So we were fortunate at the time that money has come around and hopefully will help build better organisations as we move through delivery.
Okay, we all done? Okay, thanks, Louise. Any recommendations you want to send to Cabinet on that one? No, we're all happy? Okay, moving on to item number 9, the extension to the Public Space Protection Order. Call on Ms Button. Penny, over to you.
Thank you very much.
Deja vu, I think.
I was going to say that. So, you'll remember I was here last month to talk about the fact that our current antisocial behaviour PSPO and alcohol PSPO are due to expire on the 31st of July this year. The impact of the original orders and subsequent orders have had a positive impact and helped prevent some of the negative behaviours that affect residents and visitors of Thanet. You'll be pleased to know that today I have brought along Joanna Taylor with me, who is the officer that deals with all of this, so she should be able to answer your questions slightly better than I did last time. We've continued to receive a number of complaints around alcohol behaviour, and our 2024 strategic assessment has identified that drunken and rowdy behaviour is one of the largest areas of reported ASB in Thanet, along with misuse. The use and misuse of alcohol can also factor into a number of crimes, including assault and burglary, just to give you opposite ends of the spectrum. What you hopefully will notice from this one in comparison to the last one was that we have made some changes based on the feedback that we were provided with. So we have reduced down the area that this will cover to, or whilst we receive complaints across the whole area, we've focused this down on the main urban area, so basically Ramsgate, Broadstairs, Margate, and around the coast to Birchington, which are our main towns essentially. And we have changed the wording in most of the items that we're looking to restrict around the causing nuisance, harassment, alarm and distress. So it is more around, I'll take the alcohol for example, so all persons prohibited from consuming alcohol and behaving in a manner so as to cause nuisance, harassment, alarm or distress to other person or people. So no person without reasonable excuse shall refuse to stop drinking alcohol or surrender a container which is believed to contain alcohol when required to do so by an authorised person. Again, using the terms nuisance, harassment, alarm and distress. So I would ask for your comments, please.
Thanks, Penny. Members, Councillor Austin.
Thanks, Penny. I'm concerned about how we work with the police on these issues. I speak as somebody who, very early this morning, while waiting for my car to be repaired, was walking through the town centre to see a group of our favourite street drinkers out on the street with the cans of beer, shouting, swearing, and causing distress to people walking past and people sitting in the cafe that they were in front of, etc., etc. So I walked along to the police station, which is as far away as I am from the members' room, and I spoke to the person behind the counter who told me that a couple of PCs had gone out and spoken to this group 20 minutes previously. And I said, well, they might have done, but it doesn't seem to have had much effect because they've still got cans of beer and they're still shouting and swearing. And at that point, the phone went and she wasn't able to carry on the conversation. And I left because she was obviously dealing with an emergency. But it just feels to me like whenever we write to the police about this, which we do quite frequently in Ramsgate at the moment, they say, talk to the community safety team. And it just seems to go round and round and round. It doesn't feel to us like we're getting the level of support from our police colleagues that we should be doing, albeit that they've been very helpful and friendly and taken us on walkabouts and all of that. There doesn't seem to be much action. Is that fair, or am I looking at it from a jaundiced point of view?
I don't think I can comment on the police's response to anything because obviously that's not within our remit. I would say that we do a lot of work with them. We do focus on hotspot areas around certain issues, and I know that, and Joanna can come in a minute, I can feel her behind me about to say something, that we are working on a particular area within Thanet. I can't go into details around those particular issues. So there is work being undertaken, but obviously I can't comment on things like that, but I will let Joanna come in on some of the work that they're doing jointly.
We are trying to tackle street drinkers. We know there are hotspot areas across the district, and we do work closely with police. We do, on the prolific street drinkers, look at it from a holistic point of view as well as an enforcement side of it. So we do work with Forward Trust, we do work with the RISE team, we do work with mental health services. So we try it from the holistic point of view as well as the enforcement point of view. It is a struggle, unfortunately, it is a struggle, but we are moving things forward, and having the PSPO in place gives us that extra power should the holistic approach not work.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I mean, I'm not suggesting that we, come down like a ton of bricks on people who obviously have a mental health issue or an addiction. That there's obviously got to be support in place. But on the other hand, just as it is very early in the morning, and these guys are already well popped up and causing distress to passers-by, and that happens every day in Ramsgate Town Centre, as you know. And it's just not okay. We're starting the tourist season. We're going to have visitors coming in. That's what they're going to see. It feels to me like we're not getting the level of backup from the police that maybe we have a right to expect. But maybe I'm just looking at it from a particular point of view. But as I say, when I was this far from the police station and the police had already come out to speak to this group, and then they'd gone off on walkabout and the guys are still there with the cans. It doesn't seem to be working to me.
I was going to say, I don't think we can say anything else other than I can't agree or disagree on.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. There is going to be a little element of Groundhog Day with what I'm about to say as well, I'm afraid, Penny. And again, apologies for late notice, and I spoke to Jackie earlier about this. This is to be applauded, particularly in terms of the problems with alcohol, street drinking, and so on. And the whole initiative is to be applauded. However, I have been contacted again today regarding Section 7, Prohibition 7. In that, the description is still all persons prohibited from using language or behaviour causing or likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress to any other person, without a definition of what actually defines that. That, in essence, removes any right to protest, particularly if it refers to groups of 2 or more people. I'm not quite sure what the protest was. There was one going on outside Queen's House in Ramsgate yesterday. Under the terms of this, every single person there would have been arrestable. If somebody had the right to complain and say, I don't want that, then it bans their right to be heard. Could I make a suggestion, perhaps? Because the issue is, as I say, and the Free Speech Union's lawyers have contacted me, the issue is with Section 7 and its current format. Is there any way they have reached out, and I said to them, I said they needed to be talking, obviously, to the legal department, which I mentioned with Jackie earlier. And
do you want to just come up for a breath a second and let Penny just come in on that?
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Turn your mic off.
Sorry.
So in terms of the, just to tackle the thing about congregating and protests, it does not affect that right at all. If you read it, it is specifically around the congregation of a group of 2 or more people being abusive, alarming, threatening, insulting, intimidating, harassing, distressing to members of the public or causing a disturbance to other members of the public for a duration specified when directed not to do so by an authorised officer. So they wouldn't be directing somebody that's carrying out a lawful, peaceful protest. It is around that abusive, alarming, and I would suggest that most protesters are not causing distress or being abusive to people. In terms of the Section 7, harassment, alarm and distress is identified in legislation within this piece of legislation that backs this up as to what that does mean. I know that Jackie is going to come in on some of the comments around talking to our legal team because we've had a conversation as well. So yeah, if you're quite happy with that. So you've been blinded. the light. Are you quite okay to do that, Jackie? Is that all right?
Yes, I've spoken with Ingrid at length about this. She's asked me to say that legal took the view that it was necessary to further review the way the order was drafted because some of the provisions were too wide. There's a number of changes that have been made, and these are as follows. The most significant change is to the restricted area, which no longer covers the whole of Thanet, but only those areas where the council has evidence that those activities are being restricted under the order are an issue. 2, the restriction in relation to the antisocial congregation has been narrowed so that it now only applies to those persons congregating as part of a group of 2 and being abusive, threatening, insulting, etc., or otherwise causing a disturbance. 3, the misuse of public space restriction is also narrowed so that it only applies to those using a public space otherwise than intended on the grounds that the use or behaviour is causing or is likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress to others. 4, the use of foul language or abusive language restriction is narrowed by an additional requirement so that the restriction now applies only to those using foul or abusive language in such a manner that is loud, can be heard by others and causes either offence, upset, alarm or distress to any other person in a public space. 5, the alcohol restriction is narrowed similarly, and so that the restriction only applies to those consuming alcohol in the restricted area and behaving in a manner so as to cause nuisance, harassment, alarm and distress to others. 6, the restriction requiring someone to surrender containers believed to contain alcohol, again is narrowed so that it applies only when someone is intoxicated and their behaviour is causing a nuisance, harassment, alarm or distress. And finally, the additional requirement of behaviour causing nuisance, harassment, alarm or distress is also applied to the legal psychoactive substances.
Thank you, Jackie. A superb answer, and thank you for answering all of those questions. As I said, I'm simply bringing forward the contact that I had, so and hopefully that will settle people's minds and reduce any risk to the council. So thank you very much indeed.
So we're all quite happy with it, Councillor Wing?
Yeah, it was a GMB. I went and had a chat. They were playing some music and they weren't swearing or anything. They were very nice. But there is we've taken a bit of a keen interest in what's happening in Ramsgate. So we're regularly walking the town centre. So Sunday morning they were out, Saturday morning they were out, Sunday evening. No, not the GMB. Our street drinkers. And I do think it's, you know, the people who are mainly responsible for this are the police. And I think we're doing everything we can to report those crimes, and I know they're considered by the police as being quite low-level crimes, but they happen in such a frequency that there's a build-up with residents and businesses. So we know there are businesses in Ramsgate that are negatively affected by our street drinkers, but I don't think it's what we really need is a sort of a multi-agency approach. So the town doesn't look great, which could be helped by RTC. The flower beds are not great. You know, the shelters are not getting hit and they were all refurbished. So I don't think it's a case of just relying on our enforcement people and the police. We need to work together to try and improve the look of our towns, because then I think that makes a big difference to how people behave in our towns. As I say, we're pushing all we can with the police as ward councillors, because people don't feel safe in the town centre and businesses don't feel safe. But the one thing I wanted to say is I've been round looking at the PSPO signs, and there's two sorts of PSPO signs. There's the ones with the little people, you can't pee, you can't swear, you can't do this. And then there's the other old set, and sometimes I think and then there's another one which is about specifically drinking, so that actually there's 3 signs. Is there any way we could look at the signage and maybe try and get the signage in prominent locations? Most of our street drinkers and our people who are using substances are behaving, I would say, within 10 to 20 metres, A, of the police station, and B, which is pretty shocking, and B, within one of those signs. So I think that would definitely help, and maybe we need a bit of a publicity push on behaviours that are acceptable. And I'd also like to think that we could, I worked with gang affected kids, and the approach jointly with the Margate Task Force at the time and Charlton was to very much around restorative justice. And I think that maybe some of these street drinkers, when they're not totally intoxicated, if shop owners and people like myself and maybe residents could sit down and have a sensible conversation with these people to just try and explain the impact they're having on our town. I think you get, I certainly walk around town and I have this feeling of anger towards them, but then I have this real feeling of, oh my God, we need to change their lives. So it's a real emotive, I find it quite emotive, because I swing from anger and frustration that they're destroying the town to, we've got to help you improve empower you to change. So it's hugely complicated, and all I think we can do is be as kind as we can, but as firm as we can, and try and keep plugging away, really.
Councillor Curry.
Yeah, I think the main tool that the police have at their disposal is the Section 35 dispersal order. I agree with Councillor Wing that the task force has a big part to play in this, because we know where the hotspots are. We used to see the task force sort of attend many target roads, and I think that a mixed approach, softly, and the mixture of task force agencies would be a really good idea to look at these hotspots, and I think that would be a good way forward.
Councillor Faruqi?
Thanks very much for that. Has there been any strategic thinking behind how we might audit how effective this is, and particularly how well it is enforced, just to ensure that the really good intentions behind this are actually just as real as they are apparent, to make sure there's substance to it?
We do go round each and every town and do surveys with the public. We either do it at the walk and talks. You may have seen us around at the walk and talks to try and gauge people's feelings about the area and if they are feeling safer. We don't just do that at walk and talks, we do that at all of our engagements that we go to. Statistically, we look at the data. We get the data from the police, how many fixed penalty notices they have issued. Now, it can be quite a low number because we want to educate people. You know, we can confiscate the alcohol and we don't have to give a ticket for that, or we can use other legislation when and where needed. We do like to be data-led on everything that we do, because then we can actually show that we have an impact. Now, we have a strategic assessment every year, which is where we've got the data to put into this PSPO, and that comes every single year, and we are getting better. We're still the top, but we are getting better. So hopefully when the next one happens, we'll see an improvement even further.
Thank you.
Councillor Green?
Could I ask, is there an approved way of approaching the task force to ask them to focus on a particular problem?
So it would be the Community Safety Partnership that work on particular problems, and that can be done through myself or through the team, and it would all be based around evidence of where they go into. So I can't say where they're working, but they are working on this particular issue in one part of Thanet at this precise moment in time. So yeah, that is how it works. So if you want to raise any concerns you have about specific areas, then do so either through the community safety email or to myself, and then I can liaise with the team.
Yeah, I think we spoke with, is it Ian Swallow that came, about bringing back neighbourhood engagement, I think, because that seems to have gone by the wayside since COVID, I think, Councillor Austin.
Can I just add for the minute something that I know I've said endlessly to both Penny and Joe previously, which is, as ward councillors, we are really keen to be involved in ways that we can support. So whether that's surveys, engaging residents, that kind of thing, we're out and about doing this kind of engagement of residents all the time. And if we can help with that, we'd really like to. We kind of feel there's sometimes a gap between us and the neighbourhoods team we find out what's going on too late to be of help. And we'd really like to have more information earlier and ways that we can help. And if we can't help, fine, fair enough, if it's not appropriate. But there's all sorts of ways that we have links into the community that could be helpful, and we'd really like to be useful.
Just come into your head while we're talking, but I do know that the shops and residents we've taken, and it's not a criticism of Thanet, it's a criticism of the police, because people have given up ringing, is it 101 and reporting online because they don't feel, or even going directly to the beat bobbies because they feel there's platitudes, and then the crime isn't necessarily registered as a crime. And Inspector Swallow said our numbers are based on crime statistics. So it is really tragic that a lot of people in Ramsgate have actually given up reporting to the police because they feel as if nothing happens. But I don't know whether residents and shop owners can report directly to the community engagement team. I mean, there's only 5, isn't there? So we don't want them swamped with...
So no, crimes have to be reported to the police. We aren't responsible for them, unfortunately. So they would need to be reported to Kent Police.
Okay. Councillor Bright.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of things. I'm just interested to know, apart from the police, who's authorised to enforce PSPOs, or is it just the police? That's my first.
No, it's all of our enforcement officers are able to, as well as Kent Police.
And how many enforcement officers?
So we have 5 in Joanna's team, then we have some in our street scene enforcement team, then we have the beach enforcement team as well that are also able to.
Are probe security part of that? Because obviously on the town council, probe security do like little patrols of the park and the beach that the town council obviously pay for. Would they be authorised to enforce PSPOs?
So we don't use probe security for anything that we deal with at TDC.
But because it is, if we're covered by the PSPO, is that legislation that they are able to then use, or?
So no, they'd have to be employees of TDC to be able to do that, sorry.
And then the other question is there a plan, or have you already been going into schools to tell them about the new PSPO and what people are allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do? Thanks.
Yeah, so it will be part of the general work that they do. We haven't done any specific school work around the PSPO because obviously until we get it agreed, we can't start to promote it, but the work that Joanna's team do in schools in general will include this. Do you want to add? Sorry.
When we do go into schools, because we do a lot of work with schools, they were part of the consultation on what hopefully is coming up in the new PSPO. They were part of that consultation. And I believe the Youth Council as well were part of that consultation.
Okay, members, thank you. So, any recommendation? No, we did have one recommendation put forward last time to Cabinet. Do we still want to put that same recommendation forward? Do you want me to read out what it was? Okay, I'm reading from the minutes. So it says the panel had concerns about resources for enforcing the new combined PSPO. Do we still agree we want to send that to Cabinet? Okay. Did you get that, Stephen? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Penny. Thanks, Joan. Moving on to item number 10, transition of shared services. I'll call on Chris to introduce this one.
Thank you, Chair. So this is quite a lengthy and technical report, so I'll try to spare you all the detail and summarise it as best as I can. This report effectively is being presented to Cabinet next week to conclude or ratify a decision that was taken back in January, a decision in principle to set up a new local authority trading company to replace the contract that we've got in place currently with Civica for the provision of revenues, benefits and customer services. So that decision was made in principle subject to some of the technical documents you can see that are appended to this report, which include the shareholders agreement, the articles of association and the business plan. Those documents are obviously technical, legal back documents. They've been developed over the last few months, work by Ingrid and her peers, the other monitoring officers at Canterbury and Dover, and also with input from the external legal firm Blake Morgan in order to develop that. I don't propose to go through the detail of those documents, but I'm happy to take and try to field any questions on those to best as I can. So in terms of some of the background behind this decision, or the initial decision to set up the Blackco, I think it's fair to say we weren't looking to exit the contract with Civica. They took a decision to effectively exit this part of the market. They are primarily a software company and they get higher returns from the provision of software services, and they were taken over by another firm as part of a merger and acquisition, and the margins that they can get on that part of their business operations are much higher than the provision of what they call business processing operations that they have been providing to us. They've completely exited that market. They've provided those services to a number of other councils. We're actually the last one to go. The other thing to say in terms of background is the service has been, since as what was with and has been with Civica, I would say high performing service. Both officers and councillors and the members of the public seem to be happy with the service that's provided to them, and as such we were largely looking for a lift and shift model to try and take what we had with the existing contract and move it across to something that was as akin or close to that as possible. The local authority trading company is what I would say provides us with the best of both worlds, in that the service comes back in-house, so it's no longer put out to a private company, but we're still able to operate it in a commercial manner, and that's something actually the staff themselves have really enjoyed and benefited from the benefits that come from operating what you would consider a commercial manner, as opposed to what has been a traditional local authority setting. And the feedback we've had from staff is actually that's something that they very much want to continue with, and that was one of the reasons that the local authority trading company was presented as a preferred model, alongside also the opportunity for us to trade and generate a commercial income from sort of ancillary services attached to the primary provision of providing services, customer services, revenues and benefits back to the 3 councils. So it's largely, I would say, what's been proposed as a lift and shift model. It's a people contract, and we're looking to maintain those sort of existing terms and conditions that the staff are currently sort of enjoying, with a real key focus on maintaining and retaining some of the key staff, particularly at a high level in the organisation, given the service standards that are currently being performed, because were risks around flight risks and senior staff leaving the organisation, and we really wanted to make sure that was secured in order to maintain that service provision. The other thing I wanted to sort of emphasise is there's been lots of work that's been going on in the background prior to this, particularly since the report was approved in principle in January. The monthly, myself and other senior officers have been meeting with senior councillors from the 3 councils, with the leaders, deputy leaders and portfolio holders, to brief them on the progress that has been made to date. There's various different governance structures in place, with officers that are attending different meetings and work streams that support the whole transition project, whether it's HR, finance, ICT. So it's quite a complex project, but it's moving in the right direction and in a timely manner. What I would say again, finally, just to wrap this up, this effectively is members' last opportunity to make comment on terms of the decision-making process in terms of establishing a LATCO. It's already been approved by the Cabinet of Canterbury. They approved it a week or so ago. It goes to our Cabinet in just over a week's time, and then Dover the following week after that. Subject to all the Cabinets approving the decision and the report, all 3 councils have got very similar reports that are presented to them. It will then finally go to East Kent Services Committee on the 13th of August, and that effectively will ratify the decisions, and from then on we will be looking to register a company at Companies House, and then we're really largely into the delivery phase of setting up the company with a view for it, the hard stop dates the company needs to go live and be operational by the end of January 2025, so forthcoming January, because that's when our contract with Civica ends. Hopefully I've managed to try and summarise and crystallise some of the key points there in what is a pretty technical paper, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Packman.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I fully support the councils working together. I think that's really good and a good way to have a standard way of working across the districts. However, at the time where we need services to be moving more towards face-to-face for our residents, I'm not sure that the public are going to be quite happy that we're centralising services. And I think given the level of need of advice for revenue and benefits, is there a scope to include a sense of localism into the LATCO? Because I think our residents need that, and they are crying out for it. They love the fact that us councillors are on their doorstep. So, we have a gateway just to our right. And actually, I'd love to see that brought back. So is there an opportunity to have that factored into the LATCO?
So within the way the service operates, so as I said, it's largely a lift and shift. We're not looking changes to the service delivery sort of model. I would say it's more a change of service delivery vehicle, sort of the framework around the service delivery rather than actually what the service does itself. The way the service has operated, I would say, efficiently for over the last 11 years really, since it's been a shared service 13 years, 2011, since it's moved across to a shared service model, is they effectively work as one team. So all the casework that goes into the offices isn't disaggregated between that's a Dover case, that's a Thanet case, that's a Canterbury case. It just comes in and they work through it in terms of the order of workflow. That gives them lots of economies of scale and allows them to work through peaks and troughs to make sure that we are managing high demand. So for example, we schedule when the council tax bills go out or when the green waste reminders go out for different authorities at different times, so that all the call volumes that are coming in aren't hammering one team, all at one time. Offsetting that, though, those staff that you mentioned at the gateway, they are still a presence, albeit it has been pared back slightly to an appointment process where people can go in. Those are the Civica staff who will be subject to Cabinet's approval, will be the LATCO staff who are based there, and they, those customer service operatives do still offer what I would consider a local service to our residents if they want to come in. But what we are still seeing, I'd say, in the round, is people's preferred means of interacting and transacting with us tends to be digital first, in terms of that's what our priority is to make sure those services are accessible in a timely and managed fashion. Most people are used to, if you're contacting your utility provider or your mobile phone provider, you want to be able to get through to them at a time that manages you. And so we're looking for a 24/7 digital offer wherever we can, but at the same time mindful that we are also serving people who are vulnerable, who not necessarily have digital skills to access those. But that's why we have those on-site appointment-based offers for people who need those.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think that quite answers the question of bringing localism back to Thanet. My concern is that I have no doubt that a LATCO works. It's commercially driven, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, brilliant. But it just doesn't suit some of the needs of the community. And I get you can make an appointment at the gateway, but actually you still have to phone the centralised service to book the appointment at the
so again,
it doesn't work.
Sorry, Councillor Patman. I suppose what I want to try and say is this report isn't necessarily defining what the service offer is. It's defining the way the service is delivered, what the framework is. If we wanted to deviate from that and change the service delivery sort of offer, that becomes a policy decision for Cabinet or Council as part of the budget setting process to determine at that time. The decision that you make in terms of whether it's a LATCO or a shared service doesn't necessarily, I would say, affect that, unless you were going to say, we want to go super local, completely disaggregate the service and bring it back in-house as a standalone service, which we've seen with some other services. What I would say is you're then looking at an extreme cost pressure. The reason shared service, particularly this one, was set up in the first place was to manage some of those cost pressures that we were facing back in 2011, particularly in terms of revs and bends, so provision of council tax and benefits and contact centre based services without sounding too insensitive. They're probably as close as I could say to local authorities get to producing widgets. You know, in terms of their standardised services, we can track the calls that are coming in, we've got volume data, it's very standardised. There's legislation that doesn't allow us to really tailor what the offer is. The benefits that are provided are set out in statute. You know, we've got council tax needs to be collected in a certain way, so there's less scope for these services than some of our others in terms of a local tailoring of the offer. That said, if members were minded to do so, I would say more so as part of the budget process rather than in terms of selecting a delivery vehicle, and they wanted more of a presence at the gateway or other, that's a policy decision, but obviously that comes with a cost that members would need to consider and possibly trade-offs elsewhere. Hopefully I've got to that a little bit more succinctly this time. Thanks, Jack.
So to confirm, so the public won't notice a difference in the service. If they phoned up for Civica one day and spoke to a person, they phoned up on day one of LATCO, they'd probably speak to the same person, all the staff will be two-peed over, etc., etc. Okay.
Just to confirm that, yes, very much so. We'll hope that actually this will be completely seamless for customers or residents. When our residents access the customer services or council tax, actually what we want them to be thinking is that they're contacting Thanet District Council, or if they're in Dover, they're contacting Dover District Council. All the correspondence that we send to them is, they've got email addresses and telephone numbers that are Thanet Council specific. It will be a success and should be measured as a success if residents don't notice a difference, if there is a lift and shift and a seamless transition from one one offer to another, and yet just to confirm, all the staff have TUPE protection. There's no redundancies associated with this transfer.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, it was two sorts of questions. On the first one, a lot of the names in the report of who people that will be responsible in the company are senior people already within Thanet District Council that have a lot of responsibilities. The first thing I was going to ask is, do you think there's going to be enough bandwidth at that senior level to also take on running a trading company and effectively taking something in-house? And then the second question was, is there any concern that by bringing that in-house you may lose some of the connection to innovation and new technologies that, you know, may, not necessarily definitely, may have come from having an outsourced contract in the way it currently is, and so we may lose out on some of that knowledge. And if you are concerned about it, has there been any conversation about how you may mitigate that?
Excellent question. Thank you, Councillor Scobie. In terms of staffing responsibilities, I'd say the primary new responsibility probably falls at a company board in terms of the appointment of the director, and particularly the apologies, I can't remember if named in the report. There'll be representatives from each three councils. For us, it'll be Andrea Plant, the head of estates. She'll be sitting as a board member, and that will present some new responsibilities. There were some considerations as to who the best place officer should be to sit on the board. Very much of the view it shouldn't be a statutory officer, because it could potentially present a conflict in terms of, if it was myself, for example, I can't represent the financial interests of the company and also the council at the same time. So there is a potential additional burden there in that respect. However, the rest of the responsibilities, I would say, largely mirror the existing setup we've got in terms of how we client the contract with Civica. They're just not necessarily set out in terms of the same in this documentation here. So I don't have particular concerns, I would say, broadly across the large swathe of staff. The other members from the other officers, sorry, from the other two councils are experienced members of staff, again, who I think have got the right skill sets. We've tried to make sure it's a broad range. It's not just all people from finance, because this is a people contract, you know, it's also around making sure the staff are properly engaged with. You've got someone with a commercial mindset, all those types of things. So there was a piece of work that we were doing to assess the skills of the board to make sure that they were it was appropriately balanced. So that's new territory for us, and we'll need to make sure that is properly resourced, and we'll monitor that as that goes along. In terms of the innovation from a technological side, we've certainly benefited, I would say, in terms of the partnership with Civica, because we use their software, for example. So Civica provide the open revenues system that that the Revs, Bent and Customer Services team use. Our intention is to carry on using that system, so we're not departing from that. I expect there will still be close links between the company and the existing staff. They've been in the company for a long period of time, and to a degree there was already a commercial relationship between the two separate arms of the company. Certainly I've spoken to the senior members of staff. The software company is selling services to the business processing arm of the company, so that becomes slightly more contractual. So yeah, there is a risk there. I think that's something that needs monitoring and again managing, but it's not something that I think is a particularly high risk in terms of its impact, mainly because we're continuing, as I said, with the same software provision, and we've got those relationships built up within Civica at the moment. I think can transfer across to the LATCO, and those relationships being maintained, albeit outside of the same company now.
I've got 3 or 4 questions, sorry Chris. Is there a cost saving, is my first question. So is there a cost saving? Is there scope for more joined up working? Recently, I mean, our empty property officer is fabulous, and he's actually been out on some visits. You know, I've shown him some empty properties in our ward. And one ongoing problem with the property that he's definitely not occupied. We tried to find out whether that house has been is subject to the empty property levy, which I think is 200% council tax. Now, he said he didn't know who to talk to, so we both tried to find out, and it was a Civica officer who then couldn't give us that data either. So it made me think that we might have a whole host of empty properties that actually haven't been subject to the empty properties levy, and there could be a whole load of money that we could collect. So that's the joined up thinking there, because the Civica person didn't know, and she said, give me the address of the property and I'll find out for you. Could this grow to bringing in other services in-house? And the one that comes to mind straight away is agency staff. I worked in a school where I was responsible for growing our staff because we had problems recruiting because we were in quite a rough area. We had no problems recruiting once we introduced a way of growing our own staff, both support staff and teachers. And it seems to me that by bringing the agency provision in-house, it's also an ideal way to actually grow our own staff and actually develop our own staff to solve some of our staffing issues. So 3 questions there.
Wing, thank you. So in order, in terms of cost savings, there are some cost savings that we've built into our budgets already. For Thanet, it's in the region of about £100,000. That's largely come from the fact that Civica are obviously operating on a commercial basis, they're making some profit. So we've been able to take the profit element out of that contract and take that as a saving. Obviously, there are some new overheads that we've had to take that offset that slightly, but in the region, it's somewhere around about 100,000, and we think that's fairly prudent and actually could be closer to 200,000, but we've not banked that in terms of the budget at this stage. In terms of scope for more joined up working, absolutely. I would say Civica have been really, really good in terms of how flexible their staff have been. I don't think you would you'd recognise it as an officer or an outsourced contract. I'd refer back to the work they did over the pandemic. They were absolutely outstanding in terms of the way they responded to that and the way they administered all the grants. But bringing them back into, local government control, albeit at slightly arm's length, definitely opens up the scope for a little bit more closer work, and that's something we'd want to be in place anyway, but definitely greater scope for an agree with the area that you've identified. There's obviously crossover between benefit provision and housing. That's something that we always look to try and align as much as we can, but things can fall through the cracks. Growing, absolutely. It's not the primary objective right now. The primary objective is to get the service transition across and maintain service delivery, because that's really what the service should be measured at, is are we still collecting council tax? Are we still getting the benefits out the door? Are we answering the phones in a timely manner? In the long term, maybe over sort of 18 months to 2 years, we definitely will be looking at income generating opportunities. The first sort of areas for scope, we've not looked at agency staff, but I'm happy to have that conversation and see if that's somewhere we could explore further, is actually provision of training. The staff are really geared up, highly skilled in terms of call centre handling, is the stuff that we can do in terms of helping other organisations in terms of where they pitch and manage their phone calls, because they've got a really effective and efficient way of dealing with those. The other things as well, we've been looking at the provision of IT services, potentially to smaller organisations, be it, Will, you'll be pleased to hear this, can we provide cyber security services to schools and other small organisations? So those are the types of things that we're looking at potentially doing. But at the moment, they're ancillary. Our primary focus is really getting the company established, getting it stable, and then after that, looking for growth. Thanks.
Any further questions? We're all happy then? Okay, we're happy to send that off to Cabinet. Thanks, Chris. Okay, moving on to item 11, the review of the Scrutiny Project Scoring Matrix, which we've all been waiting for. Okay, this report is to introduce the approach for prioritising how we view projects. So we've all had a look at it, yeah? We've all been through it, studied it. Any questions? Councillor Austin?
So it feels to me like the elephant has laboured and brought forth a mouse. What we've actually got is a review of our criteria, which involves taking the old criteria and removing one of them. It doesn't seem to me to be any more complicated than that, but maybe I've missed something. I thought we were going to have a broader discussion about the purpose of the scrutiny committee what we're here for, what kinds of reports we can do, how we can contribute to the council through those reports. It feels to me like this narrows us down again in comparison with the potential of scrutiny working groups, etc., that we heard about when we did the scrutiny training during our induction.
Yeah, I don't think this is here to review how we work as a panel in the committee. This is purely about subjects that we bring to scrutiny and how we score them and how we prioritise them and decide whether that's an officer report. And I think I spoke at full council last week about it, how we deal with it, whether an officer report, a full review, or whether a portfolio holder. So, and I think Charles and Nick were looking at it and they thought it was a little bit overcomplicated how we mark them to prioritise them. So they took out one of them, which was how I think there was a couple of them that they took out. Yeah, I've got the changes here somewhere. Yeah, how long the suggestion had been on the list, and also deciding however long it's on the review, how many officers. Looking at officer resources, I think was the idea. But I mean, if you want to change anything, this is the opportunity for you to change it, how you score it, or whether you're happy if it's that they simplified it in the way Nick and Charles have done it. I mean, if you look in Annex number 3, there is a form now which is this one, which is for you to fill in for any subject, or if another member comes to you, a member of the public comes to you to fill in, and it has the criteria on it as well. It's all straightforward. You can come back.
So when we discussed this at the beginning of this council, we raised concerns about the way that the scoring worked. But we then ended up using the scoring for the programme that we've had up to now. And some of the things that we've done and are doing fit well with that scoring, and some of them don't so much. And there's still potential to do all the exciting and marvellous and wonderful things we were told about during our induction, but not on this scoring mechanism. So it feels to me like we need a rather wider discussion about what we think we can do. And realistically, we have to factor in the level of support we can reasonably expect from officers into that. It's no good us planning to do something that's going to be world-shattering if actually it's going to shatter the state of our officers. So we've got to be realistic about what we can do, and there needs to be something in there. I welcome removing the how long it's been on the list, which was a nonsense. But I do think that perhaps we need a discussion amongst ourselves about what we're hoping to get out of the reporting that we're doing. Because certainly, for example, the business about does it save money for the council or generate, it's a helpful thing, but I don't think it's an essential thing. And for example, the working party that some of us are on at the moment is about bringing money into Thanet, which relates to the corporate priorities about growth, etc., and well-being. It doesn't relate to bringing money into the council as such. So I feel it's unnecessarily narrow.
Okay, so I mean, obviously we've got some training coming up, so it's a chance for members who have only just joined this year to go along, and then maybe a discussion after that, maybe with the new government guidelines, then maybe there are some new ways of thinking, and maybe then we can come back and have another agenda item. Maybe that's a completely separate discussion, I think, for where you come from. But I mean, this is about, I mean, we haven't got many subjects on the matrix at the moment. I think we've got 2 that are outstanding, which are both going to be reviews. So we need some subjects coming in, which is what I asked for, and then so you need to start filling these forms in and get some subjects, and so for future agendas. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair. I think if you're looking purely at the scoring system, it's much better, and I think the right steps have been taken in terms of that. But we probably need to step away from it a little bit. The scoring system is to help officers to guide us. But if we sit at a meeting and one of us I propose that we set up a working party on something, we as members still have the right under the Constitution to do this. This scoring matrix is not in the Constitution. We're not amending that. So we as members still have the right. So we need to view it as a tool to help us guide how officers are prioritising these things. If we disagree with it, we have an opportunity to change it. And another point I'll make is I think we need to be a lot more disciplined about what we put onto this list, because I said this at the last meeting. I think that we should not become a committee that goes for people's pet projects or political views on a particular area. I think we should be reviewing and holding the Cabinet to account for how they're implementing the corporate strategy and areas of the council that's underperforming. And I have to be honest, there are things that have been put on the list in the last year and in previous councils, scrutiny working, that don't, in my view, fit that. And there's issues that we could be talking about that we're not. So I think some of that onus is on us. And there is an element that I said this at the last meeting, so apologies for repeating myself, but we're now able to discuss this. There should be a vote about what actually goes on to that matrix. It shouldn't just be a case of somebody goes, oh, I want that looked at, it goes on there, and then just sits there forevermore as something that we eventually get to, so then people feel they've got to work on it. You know, this is a majority committee, as every committee in this council is. There should be a majority view as to whether a topic goes on there for consideration. And if it doesn't, it shouldn't go on.
I appreciate that. I don't think we've ever had an extensive list of subjects. I think we've always had 3 or 4, and then we've said, should we look at this one next month, this one the next month, and that's exhausted the list. I think there's 2 major items. I think both you put on there, health and well-being and cost of living crisis. I don't know who put those on there. I think they're the next 2 for reviews, but obviously we've got a review in progress at the moment, and they're just as and when they come further on in the year and maybe next year. Councillor Austin.
I absolutely agree with Councillor Scobie. However, he's a new member of this committee, and this is not how it worked when we started. We were told that this was the way that we were going to score, and when it was scored, then these would be the things that we would work on. And the discussion about what was actually going to be important to the council and important to this committee was curtailed to the point that we've ended up with a very small list of topics, some of which may well have been people's pet projects, but actually most of which were things that were thrown out in a broader discussion and came to the top of that scoring matrix by virtue of the fact that it wasn't a very good matrix in the first place.
Councillor Green.
I mean, I agree with Councillor Scobie that holding the Cabinet to account is a major topic. But we've also got, you know, for instance, where the community safety body, which has, you know, got nothing to do with the Cabinet. And I think we also have a broader remit to look at other things in Thanet that affect our residents.
Yes, exactly.
Definitely. But unless we feel... I fully appreciate what you're saying about having a vote. But if we had 50 subjects and they've all been marked the same, then maybe we need to have a vote what comes next. But without any subjects on that matrix, then how can we decide what we're going to look at next? But I do agree with what you're saying. We had Southern Water in here last term, and we can look at whatever.
I think one of the things we've got in the matrix is, you know, is this a topic that raises strong feelings, etc., etc., etc. But we actually need something that's about what's the impact of this topic on our residents. We don't have that as such. And Councillor Green's point is well made. That was one of the things that we noticed from our induction training, was that actually we can take a topic that is outside the council's direct remit, where the council has an involvement, and we can look at what could the council be doing to make things better in that respect. And that's what we've tried to do, indeed, with the current working party. It's about how can we support our voluntary sector better, and how can we stop damn well getting in the way, which is what we do a lot of the time, actually. So we're moving along that route, but we need to generate a lot of potential topics to have that discussion and look at then how we prioritise.
Councillor Davis.
I think it's probably just as well. I remember Councillor Austin at the last meeting, or it might have been Councillor Wing, but I think it was Councillor Wing saying perhaps some update training would be welcome, because I clearly recall the training stating that anything that affects this community or the people of it can fall under the remit of this committee. So I, for one, will not be narrowed down as to my vision, and I don't think anybody else should consider that in any way. And I'd recommend that people attend next week's meeting and training so they can actually know what they're talking about. Thank you.
I agree.
Because I just want to make it absolutely clear here. I think that this committee absolutely should be looking at the big issues facing Thanet and our residents. What I'm saying is the matrix here is a tool that officers have put together for us to prioritise. But we have the right under the Constitution to say we are going to set up a working group on this. So what I'm saying is I feel like the debate on this has gone, you know, a little bit onto the matrix rather than actually talking about the topics. That's my point. And if we want to do something around a topic, let's go and do that. We could literally have a vote here and say, right, we all agree that there is one item that we want to look at. So we're going to put one thing on the matrix. And guess what? Officers will go away, look at it, work out how complicated it is, come back, and it will score top because it's the only thing on the matrix. So it just feels like we're complaining we can't get things on the matrix, but then we're not willing to actually just sort of say, let's go for one thing.
Well, the next two things on the matrix are both scored the same, and they're level pegging on the list for scrutiny. So if you come forward with another one that's on the same scoring, then they will go. Then we vote on which one we want, which is what you're asking for. So, Councillor Green.
Raise something that's a bit off topic, and that's publicity. I think we have a job to do to tell councillors outside of scrutiny that they can put topics forward, and perhaps even the public.
I think I did that last week at full council, but I was asked to do that, and I agreed to do that. But we need to.
But I think we need to talk to our publicity people.
Yeah, definitely. And councillors need to put it out to their residents on their social media. You know, there you go, Councillor.
I don't like the idea that we're just holding the Cabinet to account, because it's a very negative terminology, and I do think we do need to hold whoever the Cabinet are to account. But for me, it's more about also looking at areas for improvement, because generally speaking, this council is doing the best it can within the resources. So I don't like the fact we're always having to hold somebody to account. It could be about looking for areas of improvement. I also don't like the term pet projects, because actually the grants issue for me was a massive one, because on the feedback to over the grant funding for Ellington Park, which was 1.8 million, which we nearly didn't get, but the friend, you know, Ellington Park drove that and kept driving that. It was quite clear to us from the feedback we gave that Thanet is missing out on a huge amount of funding that can be used in our areas of poverty. In fact, I think the guy said that pound for pound, somewhere like Royal Tunbridge receives more grant funding than Thanet, and that is a shame. And that's down to, and if you want to, I will be holding, or hopefully we will be holding people to account. We have a huge body of knowledge amongst our residents. You know, I worked for Charlton and brought in 850,000 over 9 years for a project. Trisha's big experience with Sport England. We had, you know, and the skate park and the war wreck really stick in my mind, where all we needed was a named officer that could work with us, and we do the donkey work. And that skate park money, 4 million, that was allocated to the southeast, and they approached us, so we were pushing an open door. That money disappeared. Okay, so there is a huge issue, and I don't like the term pet projects, because it might be a pet project for you, but that's not a pet project for me. And that we shouldn't say we need to look at the big issues. What we also need to factor in is, you know, we can look at a big issue, but we can look at a big issue, but can we drive the outcomes? You know, we can look at a big issue and actually come to the conclusion that these are the outcomes, but we've got no power to make that happen. If you look at Southern Water as well, maybe it's not about making a difference, because we haven't stopped poo and wee being discharged into the sea. It just hasn't happened. But what we did by dragging them in is we were heard, and we were representing the views of our residents, who are absolutely alarmed by poo and pee in the sea. So I think it's not okay to just have this narrow vision of what we should and shouldn't be doing, and it's not this. I don't think it's right to name them pet projects. I don't think anybody on this board has been overtly political and said, you know, I think we should do street trees because we're the Green Party and we want more trees. Nobody's done that. You know, this is the one committee where I think we've all been non-political and been quite reasonable in what we've tried to bring forward. So anyway, that's my speech.
Thank you. I'll just come back on something that Councillor Scobie said. If you look at Annex 4, I think there's another form in there, which I can find somewhere, which is this one, which is the call for action. I mean, if you want something done immediately, I think this has been used before at scrutiny last time. I think
I'm not entirely sure what discussion we're having here. I mean,
I'm just saying if you want something immediate.
No, but I put forward my personal view on what scrutiny committee should be doing. I haven't proposed anything. I haven't said anything. We may disagree on the importance of each project, but the point is, anything that we decide to look at has to have agreement from the panel. That's all I'm saying. And the point I raised, the point I think we're talking about, which is this matrix. I've said I think the matrix is a step forward and it's a tool that we should use. But fundamentally, we as councillors can decide what we want to look at. That's what I'm saying. And so, if you're looking for somebody to propose acceptance of the matrix so we can move on to the next agenda item, that's fine, yeah. But I do think we need to be focused on that. If we want to have a debate about what topics we're doing, I'd relish that, but that's not what I was starting here. I was talking about the different things that we can do and the fact that we as the committee actually do have the power to set this, not the matrix or officers.
I just make one remaining point. We still have a scrutiny report that you yourself led, Chair, under the last council, which because of a change of leadership and change of political leadership was never actually considered. I do think we do need a commitment that whatever we produce will be looked at by Cabinet and will be looked at as to what we can do where it's appropriate. And I am concerned that the last Working Party report from Councillor Britcher's review, because of the unwelcome publicity one element of it received, may not get as detailed a consideration by Cabinet as it should get, because there's some very good recommendations in there that we really should be looking at.
I am hoping that comes to Cabinet. It's in the third quarter, so it should be within this month or next month, I should think. And I was just going to say, the review of the review. I think that's what I think maybe that's something we need to definitely look at. I think we said we were going to look at.
What's happened as a result of the that the matrix is a guide, but it's not the deciding factor, and that it's the decision of the committee,
and that we have a
discussion that will decide what is discussed. Yeah.
Matters you can move under motions that you can make without notice. I mean, it's one of those you can do. The agenda item comes up. What do we want to work on? Any councillor can raise it, gets seconded, and it goes to a vote. That's in the Constitution, which is why I sort of was concerned or confused why we were having such a discussion, because the matrix is not referenced at all in the Constitution. I can see why officers want to have it, because it can help councillors to understand that asking about certain topics could take a lot of time and pressure. But any of us can raise a point of order and say, actually, I don't, or raise a motion to challenge that. And as far as I can see, it's happened many times in the past as well.
I mean, the request was to review the matrix. We've reviewed the matrix. The options are to agree to adopt this reviewed matrix as proposed in the notes, Annex 1, Annex 2 in the report, or come up with a different approach. So I'll put it to a vote. Option 1, who agrees with option 1, to accept the reviewed as a guide, yeah. Let's agree.
No, I thought you was...
sorry, I thought you wanted to speak. Do we all agree that we adopt the reviewed scoring matrix as proposed in the notes as a guide? Okay, agreed.
May we ask for as a guide written in large letters in the minutes, please?
Okay, so item number 12 is the review of the overview and scrutiny work programme for 24-25. So we've already discussed that, so we'll move on from that. There's just 2 items. All I can say is, if you've got any subjects that you wish to do, the formers.
And then we can just propose what we want to do.
And item number 13 is the forward plan exec cabinet report list. Is there any comments or recommendations you want to make on that? No? Okay, and that concludes the business of tonight's meeting. I declare this meeting closed. Thank you all for attending. Thank you all to our officers and Jackie and members.